I grew up on team sports, playing soccer and stuff, and then coached it for years. And I think there's something about that camaraderie of a team, and you have a leader that believes in you, and you have a leader that can call you out by name and just not just talk about the game, the practice, the skill, but like, how you doing? Were you able to get through that test you were really worried about? Or, how was that vacation? Right? Just those little personal touches, I think, are just pretty incredible.
Every single individual has a story to tell, and they're great stories that need to be heard.
I want every listener to know they have the ability to change the world.
Welcome to the 1720 Podcast.
What's up, Mountain Movers? Welcome back to the 1720 Podcast. After a 3-day lockdown with the winter weather in Texas, it feels good to be back in person. And we have a great 1-2 punch with Annette Leslie last week. And this week's guest is Jeff Parsons with DPR. Jeff, thanks for joining us, my man.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
We were scheduled to record Tuesday, or was it Wednesday, in the middle of the ice storm?
Yep.
And I think Smartly Now decided, maybe we should push that off a bit.
It's Groundhog Day, so it seems appropriate. So yeah.
Today is officially
recording day is Groundhog Day. I'm not sure when you publish, but yeah,
it'll be Monday. So like 5 or 6 days ago was Groundhog Day,
right?
But yes, it does feel like it's been Groundhog Day because it's every morning you wake up like, watch the weather. Are we still iced in? Is it safe to go somewhere? Sit back down on the couch.
I was in line at the pharmacy Wednesday, and I got the text message from the ISD. School's canceled Thursday, and I was just out loud. Somebody's like, "Was it school?" They knew exactly why I had that reaction.
We could have gone delayed start today. It would have been fine, right?
This is my first in-person meeting since Monday.
Oh wow!
Yeah, same for me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it's a long interlude to get to the point where we, in the the part of the podcast, where we're like, "Thanks for joining us." Elevator pitch, or as we say, "Who's Jeff Parsons?"
Yeah, man, I'm just a guy on a journey trying to build great things. Been really blessed in my career and having a lot of fun.
I actually love that. Sometimes you get long form, sometimes you get short form, sometimes you get like a little nugget burst. That was it. That was perfect.
Right in the middle.
Right in the middle. All right, tell us kind of in the storytelling business. We'll get to parts of what you're doing now, but everybody's got a good origin story. Tell us about growing up, where you're from, stuff like this.
Yeah, I grew up in right here in the area, Parker, a little town east of Plano, and so
hardly a little town now.
I know. The other unique thing about my childhood, it was almost like a story of two lives. So my dad grew up on a farm north of Paris, Texas, up on the Red River, a little town called Garrett's Bluff, and it's right near Direct in Chakotah. If you're looking on a map, Kevin. But
Kevin's writing this down feverishly.
Well, north of Paris, I know that because we have some family there.
That'll get you there. Yeah.
You go through Paris on the way to southeastern Oklahoma. I just forgot the name of that place. The casino. What's the name of that little town right there? Where everybody goes, and it's the lake and the. Oh my gosh, my brain just stopped working. Doesn't matter. Anyway, north of Paris.
Oh, Broken Bow.
Broken Bow. Yeah, going up to Broken Bow, you drive through Paris.
Yeah, you do.
Way to save them.
Yeah,
save
barely.
That. Yeah. I'm going to edit that.
We're going to edit that.
Yeah, I'll fix that. Yeah, make me sound smart.
That's awesome.
So Dad grew up north.
So Dad grew up there, and what's interesting about that part of the story is that we still have the family farm, and where we landed in Parker, he I can tell you more of his story, but he ended up becoming an airline pilot after going to Texas A&M and going to the Air Force, and so he was based in DFW Airport. His farm was there, and Parker is like right in the middle. So that's how we ended up there. So it was literally almost equidistance for him to get to the airport as it was us to go to the farm. And so what was fascinating about that is most of my childhood, I spent all of my summers and holidays out there in Garrett's Bluff on the farm. And then my school year was sort of in town in Parker. And so, out in Garrett's Bluff, it's like time stood still. It felt like the 1950s. We're in a farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere. I can fondly remember cattle roundups and my uncle teaching me how to rope and, all those kind of stereotypical things. We had an old school like general store, like a couple hundred yards down from the house that we got to walk down as kids and like get actual Cokes of, bottles of Coke or Dr. Pepper. And then we go around collecting them because you get like a nickel to recycle them and those kinds of things. And so big skies full of stars and all those kinds of things that just the country life, gave me, and a lot of hard work. I mean, I can remember many times that, an uncle or a cousin would show up with a pickup load full of corn, and all the kids were told to go out and don't stop until you shucked all the corn. But mom and all the women, not to be stereotypical, are canning vegetables, right? And just the whole drill. So that was just kind of a whole different kind of life that I lived. And then obviously the school year I was in Parker, and it still felt a little bit like country. I mean, you got to remember I'm 53 years old. And so back in the, growing up in the 70s and 80s, Plano was barely on the map. There was actual pastures between, Dallas and Richardson and Plano. And so even Plano felt kind of small at the time. Later, it would become one of the largest growing cities. But at that time, we had a cool little ranch house, kind of nestled in the woods with a creek out front in Parker and a couple of acres. And so almost had a little bit of our own country within the city experience there too. And so that era too was sort of that era of, go outside, don't watch TV, go outside and play until it's dark, come home at dark. And so that was just sort of the simple childhood that I kind of grew up on. And so it was kind of fun to kind of be playing in both those worlds. And as Plano grew and grew, became more city. They ended up building Plano East Senior High, which was actually closer into the Parker side of Plano. And that's where I ended up graduating from later in later life. But it was really, really just kind of interesting in that, pretty simple world. Grew up playing with Legos, grew up on the Star Wars when it came out in the, 70s and 80s, and just had all that ideology. Was super exciting to think about. And so, yeah, pretty simple life, really. The one common thing, so that the farmhouse had no air conditioning, had attic fan. So we'd always crack the windows and just got used to that. The house in Parker, we had air conditioning, but my dad never turned it on. And so we used to beg him or beg my mom. So he'd go out of town on flights, and kind of an atypical life. He'd go out on airplane, go fly planes and be gone for 3 or 4 days and then home for 3 or 4 days. And it was all different days of the week, kind of given whatever the month was. And so, yeah, if he left and it's August and it's 105 out, I remember 1980 very well. And we would beg my mom, can we please turn on the air conditioning just so we can sleep tonight? But,
did she budge?
A couple times. But then we had to turn it off right before Dad got home. Yes.
It feels colder in here. He comes back. Feels 102 in here.
Yeah. Did y'all have the air condition on this week?
Yeah.
For those not in the Metroplex, 1980 was
one of the hottest summers of all time.
Yeah. I mean, wasn't it like 70 days over 100, something like that?
It was insane.
Insanely hot. Yes.
Yeah.
Insanely hot.
Yep.
Let me turn you back to growing up. And I think this listeners finally are probably picking up on my cadence as I turn to ask the questions. But like thinking about growing up in that time, like what'd you learn about you, or like what do you look back on and think, man, that we did that right, or something about your youth that you pull forward from?
Good question. So probably a number of different things. Again, I think sort of some of that work ethic out at the farm and leaning into that. And sometimes you didn't want to, and you still kind of had to. And then one school thing that had nothing to do with that, but just that I grew up on that really resonates with me. I was in third grade, and we had this teacher that was really, really tough. And I had a classmate of mine sitting next to me that clearly had some kind of learning disability or something. And she picked on him all the time. And it used to really, really bother me. And I guess I'm a little bit of an idealist, or certainly at that time I was. And I remember this one time where she was just all upset with him because his desk was disorganized. It was these individual desks that you would kind of sit at that had that cubby where you'd put your stuff in it. And she just got on him for what apparently no good reason, and literally dumped his desk out on the floor. And
this is the teacher?
This teacher. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like, here I am, third grade, barely know anything about anything. And I just knew that was wrong. I don't care. And so I kind of stood up in defiance and dumped my desk everywhere. And then I proceeded to help him pick up all of his stuff. And she was so irate with me. I ended up getting licks. That's, paddling.
Yeah.
Back when that was allowed. And I distinctly remember when I got home, my parents, kind of understand what the story was. Not a single discipline. I think they actually respected that I kind of stood up for something that was right. And I don't know, that kind of always stuck with me. Like it was pretty impactful.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
That must be something that you saw emulated with your parents.
Yeah, I think so. My dad was, and I say that, I can tell you more later. He passed away in 2008, but he was like just this man of a man. I just absolutely adored him. Probably a little more on the stoic side of emotions, but just a man of his word. His word is his bond. Shaking hands, kind of just that old school. And he always was open to taking others in. I can't tell you how many kids, whether it was my friends, neighborhood kids, my sisters, a cousin's kid that was going through a divorce, came and lived with us one summer. I mean, when I was, I don't know, 5th, 6th grade, I can distinctly remember him. He loved basketball. I kind of grew up loved basketball because he did. And he coached basketball for teenagers that didn't have anyone that was going to step up and coach them, right? And so, yeah, that kind of and there was an inspiration there that you just sort of through osmosis or witness or whatever, and that idealistic kind of mentality, and that really holds true to me today.
Yeah, it's funny how much you just pick up from the people you're around. Osmosis is probably the right word.
Yeah.
Which, as a dad, is a real reflective point. Like, okay, what are my kids picking up through osmosis from me? Like, I don't even know I'm doing it. Like your dad probably, that's just how he was.
That's right.
Wasn't doing it for the purposes of teaching you how to, he was just doing it.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden I think, well, what am I doing, good and bad, both at work and at home?
Right.
That the people are observing and emulating and learning from all the time.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's a great story about your dad.
Yeah, and then my mom, Kevin, you and I were talking about before we started recording about sort of balance, right, and different leadership styles. And so then you got my mom, who's like this, wears her emotion on the sleeve. She just fun-loving, free spirit, just complete, never met a stranger. I mean, my God, you walk into the grocery store and the clerk is her best friend. And she knew how to have fun. She would completely, different than my dad. My dad was probably a little more on the disciplinary side, and she was more of the let's go break the rules and have fun.
But not the air conditioning.
Not the air conditioning.
Cool,
no, she let us a couple times. But I can just fun memory was like we were going down the grocery store aisle with her, and she would play games. She would send me and my sister out to next aisle over is paper whatever, and go over there and grab a can of green beans or whatever. And literally, there was times where she would like toss or have us toss like paper towels over the aisle to where they were at and catch. And there was one time where I think the Safeway manager said, maybe next time y'all ought to go Krogering.
Oh, you're not allowed here, man.
Yeah. But it was so much fun. She's just a fun mom, homemaker, and just was home with us all the time. And
brothers, sisters?
Yeah, I've got an older sister. And she kind of probably took off a little bit of that too. She's really funny, really sarcastic, but always there for you. Got the heart of gold, and would do anything for me or her friends. But she loves to humble me to this day and make sure I'm grounded and stay in my place. So, but great big sister. Yeah, a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's fun.
I think those roots will do that. I find it interesting. I mean, you already did it, Stewie, with a piece of property, but you go through the hustle and bustle of career, and that farm life or getting some acreage becomes more and more attractive because time stands still.
Right.
Yes. Maybe there's not good cell service and you can't work on your laptop and your shoulders drop just staring at a sunset. That's something that I look forward to.
Yeah. That's not horrible.
Yeah.
Well, the time does stand still. I mean, those places, in as much as that's a story about you growing up, those places still exist. They're less and less, but they still exist in Texas and across the country where there's not a general store like you in your mind exists, but everybody still knows you at the Ace Hardware in town. And your neighbor, for our property, like the neighbor says, if you ever need something, don't go to town first. Just hop the fence and rummage through the barn. Right? Like whatever he has is mine. Like I can just hop, and I've never availed myself to it. But
you?
No,
the swag champion.
Well, because I have everything already. Like I've already pre-planned everything. I have it. But the point being, like, that doesn't exist in the city. Hop the fence and jump over in your neighbor's garage and see how quickly you get shot.
Not going to be a good thing.
Right. So there's some beauty, like the time stands still out there. It's awesome.
Yep.
Doesn't Parker still have those like couple acre properties? I swear that was one of the cities we were looking in pre-APR or finance going skyrocketing. My wife had me on the farm hunt, like 3 to 5 acres. And I think Parker was one of the towns we were looking in.
They do. When I was growing up, it was a minimum of 2 acres. I think they loosened that maybe even after I graduated or out of college or whatever. We just moved my mom out of the house I grew up in this past year.
Oh, wow.
So life changes and moved her into senior living, and she's doing well. But so that was a little bittersweet too, moving out of the house. But yeah, so I think they moved into some developments where the perimeter lots are 2 acres and they had some 1 acre in. But I think the 1 acre is still like a minimum, which is still, decent little piece of property, particularly that close to the Metroplex.
For sure.
Yep.
So you moved your mom out of your childhood home?
Yep.
Man, that is insanely bittersweet, I'm sure.
Yeah. It was a long time coming, probably. She's 81 and was getting to a point where with macular eye disease, couldn't drive anymore. And so it was a big house to still kind of keep up with the maintenance and whatnot. So it was time, but still bittersweet.
We joke because we have a small house in far north Dallas that I joke all the time that I'm never selling. Ashley's rolling her eyes right now. I'm never selling. The kids can deal with it when we're gone.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like the moment of like, oh, like they will actually have to move us out of there one day. And that's kind of sad to like think forward on that like silly thing I say sometimes.
Right.
Is to have to actually do it.
Luckily, I assume that's a few years away for you.
I hope so. I'm only 44. I hope I have a minute before they start yanking me out of my home.
The minute they turn 18, get out.
Yeah, you gone. Yeah, hopefully not. Hopefully not. Okay, so take me back. Graduated high school, Plano East, you said?
Yep.
Where does that take you?
Good question. So, so my dad went to Texas A&M. Pretty neat story because, again, when he grew up in that small little town, he was like the valedictorian of 10 kids. Right, so a 10-person class, and
barely in the top 10.
Yeah, I know, right? Can you imagine?
That's a numbers joke.
Yeah. Got it.
Need a calculator.
Yeah.
So that first kid in his family to go off to college, and that got him into Texas A&M. And so he studied electrical engineering. Insanely smart guy. When I was growing up, I mean, he could fix anything. And part of that comes from the farm roots, but also just, whether it's electrical, mechanical, air conditioning, anything. And I got to hold the flashlight a lot, and I learn again through osmosis, I think. I'm pretty good at that stuff too, but mostly because I was around him. And, so he went off to A&M, graduated, went to the Air Force for 4 years flew KC-135s, which is a big refueling tanker, and then got out and started with American Airlines and flew for American Airlines for 35 years. So I honestly, if you can imagine, it's all the rage because the second one came out, but Top Gun came out in 1986, right? So I'm a junior in high school, and me and all my buddies, my house was sort of the place where a lot of my buddies always kind of hung out with, and they were all kind of interested in A&M. That was, back in the Southwest Conference days, and it was either A&M or Texas, it seemed like at the time. And so everybody was really interested to hear Dad tell stories about either A&M or flying or whatever. And then when Top Gun came out, it elevated like all my buddies. Oh, we're going to go be fighter pilots, But I truly thought, well, maybe I could do this. My dad's one, so that's where I ended up. I was the only school I applied to, which you could not do that today. I probably wouldn't get in today, but applied to A&M, went down to A&M, and had full idea that I went to the Corps of Cadets. Not sure if you're familiar with that down there. Sort of the military portion of A&M. That's an ROTC, 24/7 operation. And and so I was taking civil engineering because I was really good at math, but I had no thought of construction engineering, anything. I had taken a bunch of testing and whatnot, and pretty good. And probably this has now helped in my construction career, but pretty visual. And there's a lot of visual, spatial awareness stuff that they look for in pilots. And at the time I was pretty physically fit. And so anyway, I had a 2.5-year scholarship, and I'm like, man, I'm set. I'm golden. And then some base realignments and federal cuts started happening somewhere around my junior year. So they started looking for reasons to cut kids out of the program. And so they came to me, and so I have scoliosis. So I was diagnosed like a lot of kids are, like in middle school. And so my spine is a sharp S curve, and I'm a spry little 5'6", but I should be 6 foot tall if my spine was tall, straight, supposedly. Because my dad's 6'3", but my mom's 5'0", so like I'm obviously favor my mom a little bit. Got a funny story about not making the basketball team if you want to hear that too.
I do.
But Yeah. So anyway, it was kind of an interesting time where I thought I was set. Here's my future. Like, I don't need to look back, and this is kind of just rolling through. I'll finish school and have a career whether I stay in the military or not was the only decision. It was going to be a 9-year commitment, and so it was going to be a big commitment. And then they came back and decided that this scoliosis could potentially risk, back failure through an ejection seat kind of situation if I were to fly fighters.
Yeah.
And so, so I went through a whole appeal and all this kind of stuff, and ultimately came to the realization that it wasn't going to happen. And they offered, like, you could stay in the Air Force, and I was a pretty young kid, a little selfish, kind of like, I just don't know if I want to. Looking back, I wonder, a lot of my buddies ended up in a similar situation. They ended up still serving, became logistics officers, whatever, had great careers. But it just wasn't the path for me. I decided that I was like, okay, I'm not sure that I want to go in the Air Force, and now what? I was really blessed that a cousin of my dad's, who's kind of like an uncle to me, Boy Brown, heard about it, reached out to me and said, well, you're doing that civil engineering degree. Have you thought about construction? I said, I don't know. I hadn't really thought about much. And he's in the insurance brokerage world in Alaska. That's a whole nother podcast. Phenomenal story of him going to Alaska with like $50 in his pocket back in the oil heyday, pipelines, and started, working with contractors and putting, surety and insurance together. And anyway, became a big wheel with Willis on the brokerage side.
Yeah, sign us up for that, though. I love a good story.
No, it's not a bad idea.
I'm not kidding.
He's a good storyteller.
Yeah.
So anyway, he connected me with an opportunity in Alaska, of all places, to go work with a kind of a buddy of his that's running a construction company called Alaska Interstate Construction that was supporting all the big pipeline folks.
Sure.
British Petroleum and others. Yeah, and so that was a summer. I went up there and spent the summer in kind of this unique construction world, supporting out in the middle of nowhere. So a whole different environment, and he really just kind of fell in love with it. Was doing layout and engineering, was doing sort of field reports, and kind of getting a little more play in that. And I loved it so much. I came back, and I was kind of heading down this structural discipline path of civil engineering, and dropped all my high-level structural classes, which were harder than hell anyway. And then kind of started picking up some construction, scheduling and some other stuff in my last year there to kind of round out just a general civil engineering degree, and ended up started interviewing for construction, and sort of the rest fell into place. But it was one of those sort of, times in your life. There's so many of them, right? Where you get slapped in the face, or you get the door slammed in front of you, and yet God opens this other window over here. And that whole unanswered prayers thing, I think, is exactly kind of what happened to me in that moment.
And did you have the foresight at the time to realize that, or were you more just like, everything's a mess? And
no, it's way easier to look back on as a 50-something-year-old and go, oh, look at the lesson I learned. But at the time, no, it's like frustrating as hell.
Yeah.
What is my life going to be? And I did get excited about the construction. That's sincere, and so I did at least know that, because I was always a guy. I've always been optimistic. I've always felt like I can persevere. I can move through things. So I can take the punches and kind of just pick myself up by the bootstraps and figure out how to go forward. So I guess that part of it wasn't too difficult. But yeah, it was still pretty. I was still pretty hurt.
Yeah.
I just think because of my whole life. I mean, even my dad, like he was a part owner in an airplane for a little while, right? As a hobby in addition to his professional career. And so he taught me how to fly. I never got my license, but he taught me how to fly when I was 14, 15 years old. So I was all jazzed about it. And here's the weirdest thing. Never pursued flying to this day. I literally just told my wife not that long ago, like, I'm kind of getting older. Like, maybe I need, the kids are empty. We're empty nesters now. Like, is it too crazy for me to start thinking about flying lessons? But
to which she said yes.
You think so? Believe it or not, actually, she said, that's not too stupid. Which really? That was a compliment. Like,
yeah, that's the nicest thing you've said in months.
Right. No,
that isn't the dumbest thing you've ever said.
She probably didn't even say it that rudely. She actually said, maybe you should consider that.
That sounds exciting.
Yeah,
we have a couple buddies that just
started doing that.
Yeah,
too.
Got the pilot license and the journey, and they're super stoked about it.
Oh, cool. Maybe you need to connect me with them.
I will. Yeah, both 2 former guests.
Okay.
Yeah, one of which, name unmentioned, just sold his plane. Did you know this? And bought a new one that has like all the fancy instrumentation. And I had breakfast with him this last week.
I didn't realize how old the planes are and the manifolds and all that. Like, decades old, and that's still considered new. I had no idea.
Yeah, airplanes last forever, and they They do that was a whole other. My dad was so mechanically inclined, he and another guy, and of course I'm holding the flashlight, but we would do 100-hour maintenances on the airplane that he was a part owner in. So yeah, that's pretty fascinating. They just keep up with them really, really stringent FAA rules on the maintenance.
There's a great point there. Because you said it twice and I'm going to linger on it about you just holding the flashlight.
Oh, I'm kind of joking, but yeah.
No, but that there's a great point there, right? Like for whatever reason, your dad wanted, like just holding the flashlight get you involved. And so many times I'm thinking about that story with my kids. So many times I'm like, I stop. Let me take, right? As opposed to just saying like, hey, come hold the flashlight. Come help me with this. Like I sort of rebuff the learning those things by osmosis because I need to get my hands on it and do it myself and I got to do it quick, right? Like just hold the flashlight is like a great takeaway.
Yeah.
For your kids or whatever, deploy that idea wherever you want, but it's a good one.
I saw a really funny meme not that long ago that literally said, "You can't offend me. I held my dad's flashlight."
That's right. That's right.
This is perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Because I make it sound like this beautiful moment, but trust me, there was plenty of times that I thought my name was, gosh darn it, you son of a gun.
Yeah.
Because probably the flashlight drooped and the
It's,
light wasn't exactly where you needed it,
You want to catch me at my worst? See me doing a home improvement project.
Right.
Here's a weird left-hand turn, and then we'll get back. There was a Bill Cosby stand-up special.
That's exactly right.
Okay, yeah. Do you know it?
No.
It's from the 80s. It was on HBO, I think.
Yeah.
And Cosby tells a story about how he thought him and his brother's name was GD and Jesus Christ for most of their youth because that's all his dad would call them. Something like this.
Yeah.
Those listeners out there have heard it. It's like, you messed it up. But that's the gist of it. It's like he thought his name was GD for like
exactly.
forever. That's all his dad said to him. Anyway, side quest. Okay, so take us back. So fall in love with construction, and then a new journey starts. So where do we go?
Yeah, so I started interviewing and stumbled across a guy named Robert Van Cleve who worked for Clark Morris here locally and interviewed me. So Clark Construction, not sure if you're familiar with them, was out on the East Coast, still big, very big, large DC.
Yeah, huge.
Yeah, and so they had cut a deal with a guy named Jack Morris back in the 80s, and so they were going by the moniker Clark Morris here locally, and so they had interviewed me in A&M because at the time a guy named Pete Forrester was an A&M grad, so they'd sent some recruiting down, and they said, "Well, you want to travel?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm young and single, so sure, I'll go." And so their headquarters in Bethesda, Maryland, and so, but they said, "Well, we'll do your second interview in Dallas, make it convenient." So I met this guy Robert Van Cleve, who had later become a big mentor of mine, and so anyway, interviewed there. Then I interviewed, and long story short, ended up with this job with Clark out on the East Coast, and it was a great experience. Moved out there. Funny side story. So we had the U-Haul packed, and it's in the driveway at my parents' house, and it's the night before I'm leaving, and all my buddies want to take me out for a going away party. And so we ended up at some country dance hall, and that's where I met. We started at an A&M alumni. My wife wants me to clarify that. I'm sure it was an A&M alumni sort of barbecue get together.
Sure,
but it was literally like a Cowboys Red River type place. That after that was done, the lights go down, and then it's open to the public. Anyway, I ended up meeting my future wife that night, the night before I'm moving halfway across the country.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's okay. So tell that story in more detail as much as you want.
Yeah. So when the lights go down and go grab another beer, kind of look across like you would at any dance hall and go, she looks cute. Let me go ask her to dance. And, we just hit it off like crazy, and she's a great dancer. And so we were two-stepping to George Strait and who knows what that night. And then it was really interesting, it was kind of getting late in the evening and my buddy was like, "Hey, we got to go." I was like, "Yeah, I got to get up early." My dad and I are leaving at 5 a.m. to head to DC. And so I had not told her that yet. And so I said, "Hey, this is kind of a weird thing, but, I'm moving to DC tomorrow. And, but I really like you. Like, I don't know how weird it is, but I'd love to get your number." And she said, "Oh, how crazy is that? I'm going to visit some friends." This is like May, right? Graduation May. She's like, "I'm going to be visiting some friends on July 4th weekend up there in a couple months. Maybe we could get together." And I was like, whoa, that went a little easier than I thought.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So that was kind of our first official date, I guess, was meeting up there in DC. And it was really cool. It was really special because we ended up hanging out with her and a bunch of her friends. I didn't really know anybody yet. I just got there, been there for like 2 months, and we ended up, if you've never done it, oh my gosh, amazing experience. Spend July 4th on the National Mall.
Yes.
It is incredible with the fireworks and the music and people throwing Frisbees. And it's a scene to be had, and it's so much fun. And so, yeah, we just continued to hit it up. Not a bad first date. Probably set the bar a little high. But
yeah, fireworks on the National Mall.
Yeah, right.
It's pretty high.
What's happening tomorrow?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We're everybody cleaning this mess up, and we're going to go back to our normal lives tomorrow. That's what's happening.
Pretty much. Yeah. So it is probably a longer story than I need to tell, but one thing led to another. We kind of ended up dating long distance. She was working for Mobile here locally, finance person, and so kind of got caught up with a layoff because Mobile, as all oil companies, go ebb and flow with the oil prices, and so she got caught up in that, and we're running up $300 phone bills talking to each other back when you had to pay for long distance.
Oh, that's a funny thought.
Yeah. And I said, well, it's kind of a little weird, but if you're looking for a job, would you think about looking for a job in DC? And she goes, yeah, let me think about that. So one thing led to another, and she moved up, found a really awesome roommate, like by complete draw of the luck, up there, who is still like one of her best friends today that lives up in that area. And yeah, so we kind of continued to date and flourish and got engaged, and then eventually made it back to Texas in 96. So anyway, that's about as short as I can probably do.
No, I love it. I love the idea that perhaps she's listening and thinking that's not how that happened.
Yeah,
at all.
It is.
Yeah. She's got a totally different version of that story.
Yeah.
So does Clark bring you back here? Or how does that?
Yeah. So Clark was starting to grow pretty significantly. They started to have a presence in Florida and California, and it was pretty cool rotation, just sort of bringing it back to construction for a minute. When I got up there, they had a pretty cool rotation idea program where I was field engineering, layout, surveying for a while, rolled into estimating and project engineering. So you kind of rolled through some rotations there. And then, so when I was in estimating, I was traveling quite a bit because they take this bid team. It was back in the day when a lot of work was hard bid. And so we'd bring a bid team in. We came into Dallas and kind of helped bid a big job up in Shepherd Air Force Base, Wichita Falls, about 150 miles northwest of here. Ultimately, we won the job, and I get back to Bethesda, and the same guy, Robert Van Cleve, by the way, by then had actually gotten sort of promotions and moved up there and is like leading our estimating group up there. So that's why I introduced him, because you'll hear about him a couple different times.
Okay.
And so he came to me and said, "Hey, Jeff, we won that job. Any interest in moving back to Texas?" And so yeah, it kind of got us to think of hard. We were already engaged probably by then, and already kind of shopping around where are we going to live up in DC. And so then we probably had one of our first real adult conversations besides the engagement thing to talk about what do we want to do and where do we go. And both of our families were here and everything else. And so it just sort of made sense for us. Yeah, maybe this is our ticket back. And so we moved back. And so in 94 is when we got married. And so, went to this Shepherd Air Force Base, built a pretty cool armament, munitions, and it almost brought it full circle, right? So
right.
It's a pilot training, and it's a training base. It's got pilot training, but it's also got like these munitions. So the facility we built, actually every airplane at that time, maybe still today, that the Air Force flew, they put in the hangar, and then they taught all the airmen how to put whatever rockets, bombs, whatever, how to load all that onto each different piece of the plane. So it was kind of oddly full circle, because my dad, I remember coming out to visit me one time. We were building a project and we're literally driving by, and he recognized the tail numbers of one of those refueler tanks that was sitting on the tarmac. That he's like, I flew that airplane.
That's awesome. Whoa. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, so pretty full circle, interesting deal. But that got us back to Texas, and then after that project, we moved back to Dallas, and so kind of figuring out what Clark Dallas was about. And what was interesting is through that couple year adventure of Wichita Falls and getting back here, Robert had made his way to another company and then got asked to be basically the president of Centex Construction here in Dallas. Centex ultimately becomes Balfour in later life.
Yeah.
And so I'd kind of just been following him a little bit and wasn't quite sure things were going to really shake out where I was at. And so I called him and said, hey, I'm kind of curious what's going on over there. I know you just got over there. And so anyway, he kind of set me up for a couple of interviews, and I was able to go sort of join Centex Construction. And so I owe a lot of thanks and gratitude to Robert for a couple different things. And so and what was really interesting is Clark, like I said, it was a very hard bid, and most of the industry was, right? I mean, if those that haven't been around a long time, the industry started in a pretty adversarial, tough place. It was sort of that low bid mentality, and then low prices, potentially cut corners. It just gave construction a bad name. And then there's adversaries of who had what. And I remember thinking to myself, like, surely to God, there's a better way to do this business, right? And so anyway, Robert was kind of he had this vision of like, we're going to do things different. And it was pretty cool. He was like, nope. Even Syntex at the time was a pretty hard bid, sort of federal kind of contractor at the time. And he's like, we're going to shift into a negotiated kind of developer world. And so it was pretty exciting in those early years to kind of see how that shift was happening. And
this is when, circa mid-90s?
Yeah. So I joined them in 96.
Okay.
Yeah. So exactly mid-90s. And so, yeah, from 96 to 2000-ish or so, I mean, that we completely transitioned over. I was in sort of this purchasing role that we rolled into estimating, that rolled into like, hey, why are we having a separate purchasing group, buy a job when a project manager is going to live it and own it? So how about our project managers? So it was cool to be kind of part of like in this weird entrepreneurial kind of family. Like it was really fun in those early Syntex days. And then I kind of went out and started, being a project manager again. And so I cut my teeth on several office buildings, leading projects, building office buildings for, likes of Lincoln Property or Trammell Crow and others. And started to just build my career here, and spent, ultimately spent, over 18 years, or nearly 18 years with that group, and continued to grow throughout my career. So that was just kind of a real blessing to kind of have Robert in my life and to kind of see and have that vision of, man, you set a vision and you aspire to something. It's like nothing can stand in your way. It was pretty powerful to kind of watch and see how that unfolded.
That's what I was just about to ask, and I think you answered it partially about Robert. There's something about him that you're willing to move across the country, and there's benefits with family back home and stuff, but there's been several stops where he speaks something, you're like, yeah, I'm in on that. Like, what was it about him as a mentor beyond vision that made him a mentor and somebody worth following?
Man, great question.
That is a great question.
Yeah, because high five.
Yeah.
I tell you what, the first impression with me was great. He's got great charisma and outgoing. So that's a start, not a requirement of a leader or a mentor. I don't think it helps. But one thing that really touched me is his listening intently, paying attention, and remembering things about you and your life and your family. So I guess I would shorten that to, that personal touch with people that you meet. So I had that initial interview, right? And then I move up to DC and I do the field engineering stuff. And then I move in a year or so later into estimating, just to literally bump into him and go, whoa, Robert, what are you doing in town? Oh, I just moved up here. I'm leading our estimating group now. And he stopped and says, hey, how you been? You've been getting out to Garrett's Bluff much lately?
Oh, yeah.
That's it. Garrett's Bluff, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And so that's not a town that anyone should remember. Now, to be fair, he grew up in East Texas, not Paris, but East Texas. So maybe but just to remember that personal touch, and then how's your mom and dad doing? Just really by name, so remembering names became like all of a sudden that was, and I was at that age, and it took me forever, and I'm still work at it. Mm-hmm. To remember names is I think is an incredible trait, because it just gives you that personal touch, like. They care. He cared about me. Mm-hmm. He cared enough to ask about my family and Garrett's Bluff, and not just about work, not just about estimating, not just about the next job. And so, and that continued to unfold in the Syntex era, and how he had that personal touch with. I thought it was special. No, I'm not special. He was that way with everybody, and that kind of just builds. I grew up on team sports, playing soccer and stuff, and then coached it for years, and I think there's something about that camaraderie of a team, and you have a leader that believes in you, and you have a leader that can call you out by name and just not just talk about the game, the practice, the skill, but like, how you doing? Were you able to get through that test you were really worried about? Or, how was that vacation? Right? Just those little personal touches, I think, are just pretty incredible. And so, as silly or small as that sounds, that was the baseline of how Robert, I think, drew people in.
I love that. When somebody knows my daughter's name before I think they should, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And they're like, hey, how's Quinn doing? Like, I answer the question, but I'm like, dang, like they care. Like it shows that they care, and it makes you want to be better. And it's like, all right, I'm going to remember a lot about this person, make it like a little bit of a game, but like the more reps you put into that, the more natural it becomes. And it sounds like it became natural to him.
Yep.
What is it about Robert? Let me ask that question differently. You said something about casting vision and then people being bought in and folded into and driven towards a vision. It sounds like, at least at Syntex, Robert cast.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about the way he did that facilitated that that goal or that end? How did he do it?
Yeah, I think he did it, and I think probably because he did it often. I think if you read stats, like you got to tell people something 7 times before it sets in. So there's a little bit of that. But the other thing that I think that he really emulated well was sort of this transparency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So kind of be okay with saying, like, some things that we've been doing is not going well, right? And here are why those aren't going well. And here's some things that I can see us doing better, and not just better, but like we could change the industry, right? And so he would pull large groups of people together and have these open discussions, almost open mic, and he would welcome people to like challenge him. Like, if you don't think this is the right direction for us to go, I want to hear from you.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that open, transparent, dialogue, I think, really helped.
Yeah, that makes sense. Right. It helps that transparency, that dialogue gets people bought into, you're listening, you're evaluating based on and we're all sort of collectively and collaboratively developing the vision. Ergo, I am super bought in on it.
Right.
I could see that being like a core piece of that puzzle.
Yep.
That's interesting.
I wasn't sure when I was going to bring this up, but we talked off air about how construction is second choice, almost last choice for people, and then they find their way through it. We're lucky to have you in the industry. You had that happen at school and through the Air Force, and it's like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. It's the alternative option. How do we make construction the first option for people? What do we need to do as an industry to make it better?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. Luckily, I think we're seeing more and more schools adopt construction science programs.
Yeah.
And that's good from the, we're kind of an interesting mix, right? It's really a blue collar meets white collar mix of an industry.
Yep.
And they're so symbiotic and necessary. And where I really think, and where we're concentrating, certainly at DPR, we're a self-performing general contractor. So we have half of our employees are hourly craft workers, carpenters doing, concrete formwork and drywall and doors, frames, and hardware and these kinds of things. And so, it is something we're actually, and we're in a non-union market, at least here. We're in union markets elsewhere with DPR, but here we're non-union. So we've really invested heavily in our craft and given them benefits that are almost, getting better year over year and almost on par with our salary personnel. And I'm saying a lot of that to say that we got to show them the benefit that you can make money at this. You can have a career out of this. You can grow skills that are lifelong skills. And so what we've really got to start doing is working and getting to the trade schools and getting into the high schools. And so there's more and more programs that, we're getting involved in. AGC, ABC, and others, Texo, are getting engaged in. And I think that's where because it's a little bit of a lost art, and it's as everyone knows, it's a tough labor climate. And we really got, I was lucky when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s. I mean, wood shop and metalwork and welding. I mean, that was par for the course for middle school, and they took all that out. It was pretty cool to see my son, who's maybe held the flashlight a few times for me now, kind of got into some millworking stuff. And he took some career center classes his last 2-3 years of high school, built some incredible, pieces of furniture and some things of that nature with his hands, and worked at a cabinetry shop during the summer, one summer. And so I feel like we got to get to the kids when they're early and they're young, and show them that there is a path, there is a career. And we've got some great success stories where we're taking folks out of our craft and growing them. We're putting in apprentice programs to take unskilled laborers and teach them how to, read drawings and, use a calculator and use power tools, become a carpenter, right?
Yes.
And then we're taking carpenters and foremen and doing foreman training to try and grow their skill set. And so I think the more that we invest there as an industry, then I think that's going to be a great pipeline for the builders of our future.
And once we get them in there, doing those things like signing people up for trainings, when somebody in manufacturing would come up to me and say, "Is there any chance like I could take an AutoCAD class?" My eyes get like really wide. I'm like, "Absolutely. Will you be willing to put some night school in and I'll pay for it?" And that person knows that you listened and sees that there's an investment and a future in the industry. That's what we need, a ton of that.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people get into our industry, get one look with one company, and then say, "Mm-mm." But that's not what the whole industry is represented by.
Right.
There's companies like DPR that are pushing the envelope, trying to do the right things, are very purpose-driven, that make this industry worth being in.
Yeah. Yep. Have I told the Colby May story on the air about Colby calling that guy? This comes back to a point. I had Colby May as a friend of ours, and I had the opportunity to be riding in the truck with him. He calls folks on their like birthdays and their work anniversaries and things like this. And we get in the car. He's like, "Man, I got to make a quick call." I'm like, "All right, fine." So he makes a call to an employee at Osborne who's been there for 22 years or something like this. And his phone's loud, so loud. Like I can hear the guy on the other end, but even though it's right. And he calls, "Hey, just want to say congrats on your work anniversary." And I hear the guy on the other end of the phone sort of get like a little choked up and just says, "It's been like the greatest 22 years of my life because you guys gave me an opportunity when nobody else would."
That's right.
And it's like a moment like that where you're like just reaching down and grabbing people and say, "Come, like you can have a career here. Like, come on, I can help you do this. And I see you. So come on, let's go." That story with Colby just like sticks in my brain, and the apprenticeship programs and drawing people along and finding people in high schools and just saying, "Come on, like it's here. Let's go. Come on, let's go." Those are great stories. They're not enough of them though. Like we're not promulgating that enough, and I don't know how to do it more, but that is the solution.
Yep.
Teaching parents like your kid doesn't have to go to whatever school. Like come over here. You can make a ton of money, have a great career working with wonderful people doing amazing things with your hands.
Yep.
Come on, let's go. Says the guy, the lawyer. I know that sounds like super. I know that. Anyway, I believe it.
Oh, you know the countless stories. Jeff and I were talking off air about that as well. Like because it's a blend of blue collar and white collar, you have some opportunities that people, might not have a high school degree and just have put the time in, and they show that grit, that character, all those sorts of traits that make them stand out. And it's like, oh no, I don't care about like the prerequisites. I know what you stand for today. I'm willing to bet on you. Let's rock and roll.
Yeah. Yeah. I got a couple of curveballs to go back unless you
we got to get back to DPR.
Well, I want to go back there because you said something, and I think I knew it, but I want you to talk more about it. DPR does a lot as a self-performed general contractor. I think that's the word you used.
Yep.
Which seems, at least from my vantage point, pretty unusual. Seems like everything is like sub out.
Yep.
Say more about that. Why is that your model? How does it work? It's obviously successful. Pros and cons. Say more about that.
Yeah, and maybe I start a little bit at the beginning.
Sure.
So I got and you've had him on. So Dave Burrow's been on before.
Yes.
And he came with DPR. So I'll tell that story in a minute about how I came to DPR. But what's really fascinating is it stands for Doug, Peter, and Ron. If you didn't know,
I did not know.
Yeah. So it's three founders that got together. They were up in the Bay Area. They were in their early, late 30s, early 40s, pretty well off in their career, or pretty far along in their career, I should say. So Doug's kind of more of the operations guy. Kind of grew up, carpenter, working with his hands. Ron is more of a finance guy, and Peter was sort of, they called him the brainiac, Mr. Einstein. He was more like the estimator, like really, really sharp in the pre-con world. And they were kind of being promised by their current company to maybe buy out the current family, only for the family to change their mind and give it to their kids. And so the story goes that Doug, Peter, and Ron, over a glass of wine, because they're in the Bay Area and that's what you do, you drink wine. And they said, well, what if we did something different? And what would that look like? And that particular company was, last names, almost like a law firm, very stuffy, stiff shirt, ties, and that's not who they wanted to be. And so very purposely, they chose their first names, Doug, Peter, and Ron. To this day, and we're a large company now, a lot of our emails start with first name, last initial, right? It's And so there was a lot of things that Doug, Peter, and Ron set up from the foundation, and one of them was the self-performing piece.
Gotcha.
Doug said that, we've got to be builders first, and I want us at some point. His future vision was, and unfortunately he passed away a couple years ago. But he wanted us to be able to self-perform every trade if we possibly could, and we're making strides towards that. We added electrical a few years ago, and we do waterproofing. I mean, there's a number of trades that we do. We don't do them all yet, and we don't do them all on every project. Trade partners are huge, important to us. But I think what it does for us is it keeps us closer to the building. It keeps us closer to the production and understanding our trade partners. How they win and how they lose.
Yeah.
Right. And so in the construction business, it's all about sort of planning it right, sequencing the work, a flow to the work to where it's a lean construction. DPR is a huge into the sort of the lean aspects of construction. And so this lean approach, the closest we can get to it to understand it is through self-performing the work. Because if we're doing it ourselves and we're driving a lot of the critical path, like concrete, like drywall, like electrical, then we're going to be even more successful. And so what we find is we run it like a business with businesses within the business. So it's not like, you're pretty good at this DC thing. Why don't you go run the concrete group? No, we have like expertise deep in concrete that are leading our concrete business, and likewise for the other parts of the business. And so, but it's a very, we're all it's an open office plan. We're a very flat organization. And so, everybody sits next to each other and collaborates together. And so, even on our job site trailers, it's an open office plan. We don't have offices. And so it just allows for, better communication, better collaboration, airing of challenges, and figuring out how we're going to circumvent them. And so, Doug has always said, we want to be builders, not brokers.
Man, I like that.
Yeah.
It gives you control too.
Huge.
I'm kind of a control freak. So when you take control out of the equation, it's chaos in my head. And like, I feel for general contractors sometimes where it's like, man, they got 40 plus subs on there. Hopefully 30 of them are good.
Right.
And you're like, are you going to be there? Are you going to be there? Are you going to be there? And then day of, oh, you're not here. That, the control piece to be able to know, like, all right, we could get ahead of the issue because I know it's in-house, or we could be proactive and execute because it's in-house.
Right.
There's got to be some benefit to that.
Oh, huge benefit.
Well, and it gives you, so you use your, I don't know what term y'all use, your captive trade partner, your in-house resources, whatever, on this job. And you can appreciate the dialogue with them, tensions and push and pull and schedule issues. And then when you have a third-party trade partner, you reflexively say, well, I knew more, I learned more because the guy I was working with sat next to me, and now I can manage, deal with, et cetera, the external trade partner more efficiently because I learned with the guy sitting next to me.
That's right.
That's like an amazing model.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it
gives our people a different lens to look through.
That's a better way to say what I was trying to say. But for sure, that's it. That was it.
That's why you invited me.
Right? That's
right. I'm going to say a bunch of dumb things out. You put them back together and say them back to me.
We'll splice it. It'll sound like you said it.
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to change that. What was it you said? I'm going to say it and then use it as my own.
Was it? This is just an outsider looking in, and I don't know if there's anything to it. Was it also a Doug, Peter, Ron thing, like to not have titles?
Yeah.
I just noticed with y'all, there's no titles in the email signature. Maybe there is.
No, not at all.
So if
there is, I want to know about it.
Yeah. What's the intention behind that?
Yeah, no, it's very intentional. So the company was founded. They literally declared independence on July 2nd of 1990, and so started the company. There was about 7 of them at the time. The story is that Doug, Peter, and Ron put in the most money, so they got the letters on the wall. But there
were 7 total.
7 total individuals.
Okay.
That said, hey, we're going to go off and do this together. And then obviously they grew from there.
Yeah.
One of the things that they in the like 93 or 4, I think it was, they stumbled across. They're up in the Bay Area, right? And they stumbled across. Actually, one of the guys' wife found him. Heard a lecture series of a guy named Jim Collins, who was at Stanford doing research about why companies fail and why they don't, which later became published as Built to Last. And then he went on to write, Good to Great and Great by Choice and others. And so she said, a different Peter, the second Peter of not the Peter in the DPR, but Peter Savati, his wife came to him and said, hey, you really got to listen to this guy. You guys just started this new company, and he's telling you how they should succeed or how they fail. Maybe you ought to go listen to them. And so sure enough, they did. Talked him into, because he wasn't, quite to the stature that he is today, talked him into like holding a workshop. And he held like a workshop with, at that time, I don't know, 25 employees. It pains me that I wasn't there, but I've talked to a bunch of people that were in the room and got the story from different ones. But they basically had a workshop together. And so I'm getting back to your flat organization.
No, keep going. This is awesome.
Okay. And so really cool about where he was headed with this. And basically was challenging him on a lot of different things. Like, well, what do you want to be? Well, what's your purpose? Right. And then also shared, obviously, a lot of the lessons that he was seeing of why companies failed and why they didn't. And a lot of it, what's fascinating is most of his writing, I told you that Built to Last off air is a little bit dry. It's a little technical and it's like different nuances, but he gets pretty quickly away from like financials or investment deals or, and it really becomes about people, right? And like how you treat each other and then coming together as a team in a collaborative way. Like all these intangible leadership skills really come together pretty quickly. And one of the things was, and together with already what Doug, Peter, and Ron wanted to do, they already knew that they wanted to be Doug, Peter, and Ron, DPR. They already knew that they wanted to be, and they already knew, they had already kind of, believe it or not, gone down this path and only got validated later by Jim Collins to not really worry about business cards. Now, Doug would, if he was honest with you, and I've spent quite a bit of time with him, he would tell you one of the reasons we didn't put business names, titles on our business cards is because we were selling like we were a new startup. We were entrepreneurs. We're trying to figure out, and if I had to put a PE in front of somebody and tell him he's the PM, I didn't want him looking at the card.
Yeah.
Right. So he was pretty vulnerable and honest, some truth there. Right. And then later, as we kind of meet this Jim Collins and we start learning about some different things, it became even more intentional. Like the idea of a flat organization is to say that, and Jim coins it in a different way, like what is right is more important than who is right. Meaning the idea of a flat organization is we can all sit at a table here and I don't care if he's, Kevin's the CEO and I'm a laborer and you're the foreman and this person's over here, vice president, and that person's the PM. We're all at the table together. So if we could like strip those titles away, check those egos at the door, and we're a team coming together. Yeah, we all have a role to play, right? We all have different strengths and skill sets and a role to play on this job. But if we can come together, we're going to be way smarter together than we are by ourselves. And so that's the real idea of this flat organization. And so that transcends itself in so many other ways. Again, with no titles on the business cards, we all sit at the same size desk. Mm-hmm. Doug sat at a workstation. I sat at a little 5x5, workstation with not even high cubes. Like I could look across and talk to you, across the way. And I sit right near, on purpose. Actually, Doug taught me this. I sit right near where the Keurig machine is because I want to be in the know. I want people to come by. I want to be talking to them. I want to engage with people, and I think that's a big part of leadership is being available, approachable, and around.
Let me draw an arc over the top of this because that idea, that DPR idea, that Jim Collins idea. When I ask you what made Robert special, that's what you said.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's the same thing. It's the just sit with you. Just because I happen to have a bigger title doesn't mean anything. Tell me I'm wrong. Challenge me. We're all better together.
Yep.
Same thing.
Yep. No, exactly right.
That's beautiful.
How about catching Jim Collins when he was the equivalent of still playing the drums out of his garage?
Yeah.
Come on. How cool is that?
Amazing.
As a leadership nerd.
Yes.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, so is that the end of the Jim Collins segment of this, or is there more DPR Collins interplay?
Oh, yeah. No, it's such a really cool story because that's really where the preface of what we today call our DPR point of view. And so in that same workshop, again, Jim was really challenging their group of like, why are you guys here? Why did you do what you did? Doug, Peter, and Ron, and you got 20 others in the room. What are you doing? Well, we're a construction company. We want to build cool stuff. Okay, so you want to build buildings. Yeah. Well, and then somebody popped off. Well, I mean, we want to grow each other, right? I want to grow in my career and, we're going to hopefully grow and as a business and then hire new people and grow. Okay, so you want to grow people. You want to build buildings. And Doug said, well, by far, our work is coming from our relationships. And we're relationship driven, we're customer driven, we're people driven. So, we want to build relationships. And so jump to the punchline. Basically, Jim Collins pulled out of that group of 25 that our purpose at DPR is that we exist to build great things. And it was very purposeful to use this generic things, because it is all those things. And we still stay today, 30 years later. We exist to build, we're here to build great buildings, but we're also here to build great people, great families, great relationships, great customers. And you can just fill in the blank. Great community. We've got huge community initiatives, efforts, like we'll talk about in a little bit with our Hoot and Hollar concert, and others. So anyway, that was pretty cool. The other thing that came out of that deal was he's kind of like, okay, that's awesome. Okay, now we got a purpose. And you got to remember, this is early 90s. I don't know that a purpose was that a big deal. There might have been a core values or a mission or something like that. But I don't remember purpose coming along until many, many years later. And Simon Sinek, I feel like put that on the map. But you got to find your purpose. But pretty cool that DPR was one of the first that I'm aware of companies that really wrote that down and really stuck with it. And it's so simple, it's brilliant.
Yes.
And that was one of the tags that grabbed me when I first started learning about DPR. I was like, wow, that's so simple, it's genius. And so, but in that same workshop with Jim Collins, he's like, okay, tell me about what's going well. Tell me about you guys. Well, we like to have fun. And so imagine everybody's sitting around with sticky pads and say, okay, let's start writing some of the stuff down and throwing it up on a board and kind of workshop this a little bit. All right, so you like to have fun. What else you like to do? Well, we love to collaborate. We're big collaborators. Okay, write that down. We do what we say we're going to do. When we tell our client we're going to do something, we get it done. That's who we want to be, people of our word. All right, let's write that down. And just one thing after another. One of my favorites was call bullshit. That we still all of these things I'm describing have now sort of been memorialized in this point of view document that we share with all our new employees, and we kind of revisit all the time and try and keep this essence alive. And the call bullshit idea, and maybe I'm not supposed to cuss. So call BS is the idea behind that is that if we're in that environment, right, in that environment of a flat organization sitting around that table and some senior person says, listen, intern, that's cute, but that's never going to work. Then someone has permission, I don't care who it is in the room, has permission to call BS and say, nah, that's not quite the way we behave at DPR.
I love that.
Intern,
in the moment,
please go ahead and share more. Tell me more about what you're thinking.
Yes.
Right? And it's okay in the moment. It's got to be respectful, right?
Sure.
But anyway, it's kind of an idea that we live by too. That you should be called out for not behaving in the right way. And so, all these things, which was so cool, these sticky notes ultimately get arranged in what became our core values. And so, our core values literally are enjoyment, right? And so that's the have fun, enjoy the people you work with. And so, that's one of them. We've got integrity, but integrity, sure. Is it honesty and those kind of things? Sure. But that's back around to the do what you say you're going to do. If you commit to something, get it done. And then, the other core values fell into place too, particularly with we want to learn something new every day and a little bit of the Jim coaching of, why companies fail. I mean, I was sharing with Kevin off air, Kodak invented the digital camera and then went out of business. Right. And so it's if you're not constantly challenging yourself, if you're not almost paranoid of what could go wrong or what if we became the next dinosaur and failed, how do we keep challenging ourselves? And that's where this ever forward mindset came from for us. And so we're an innovative contractor. We're very highly technically, got all the technology in the world, but that doesn't necessarily have to be what innovation is, right? Or ever forward. Ever forward could be just a different way of thinking, a different way of leading, a different process. But the other core value is uniqueness, and really that's maybe where the call bullshit kind of fits into, right? We want to stand out and be different than our competitors. We want to stand for something. We want to be unique in the way we act and behave.
I'm glad you explained it earlier too on what call BS means, because that's so huge. As a leader, I don't want my idea to win if it's not the best. But I also have to make sure I'm not shutting down an innovator and somebody that is willing to step up, be vulnerable, and throw their idea out there. We got to celebrate those, even if it's not the one chosen. Let the best idea win is where I think oftentimes leaders fail because they don't even know that they're shutting somebody down. It might not be as blunt as your example. It might be a lot more subtle than that. Subtle. Yeah. And then that person's not going to come with the next 10 ideas.
Yep.
And what kind of progress did you just lose?
Not shutting it down, but also celebrating that it was someone else's idea. Because how many times have you been involved just listener out there. Like, how many times have you been involved in a meeting where someone takes credit for someone else's great idea and they leave sort of like butthurt over the idea? Like, that's a great idea. I'm glad I had it, Jim, or what? Right?
Right.
And so I don't know that I have a penchant for stealing people's ideas. I do have a penchant for stealing people's jokes. That's a whole different issue. But I feel like I over pivot on, even if it was our idea, I'm gonna be like, Jeff, that's a great idea, man. That was the winner. He had it. Like, because I want you to have the next great one too. I don't need it. I don't need it. We need it.
Yep.
So think that through. Like, are you shutting it down? And are you celebrating it when it's someone else's and not kind of being butthurt that somebody else had a better idea than you?
My wife does a really good job in leadership of turning things into my idea and then celebrating them, like trying to find a farm in Parker. That was her idea, and I said, absolutely not out of the question. And then a couple years later, she just could play that slow chess. And all of a sudden, I'm like, what do you think about a farm? She's like, oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah. She's peppering you. Oh, great idea, Kev.
Yeah,
we should really. Chickens, you think? What do you think?
Yeah. All of a sudden, I'm like, wait a minute. I got bamboozled.
Yeah. Great idea, Kev.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that Hoot and Holler. Obviously, we had Annette on last week, and she shared her touching testimony and about Carson, which is one of the recipients of the funds of the Hoot and Holler. So I'll just tee it up like that. What is it about? When is it? All the sort of things.
Yeah. So it's it's become just a phenomenal thing that outgrew what we could have ever dreamed it becoming. Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, and so I can go back there too, but Dave Burrows came up and actually kind of helped start the DPR Dallas office a little over 10, 12 years ago. Was asked to come up to Children's Medical Center and do a project. And he kind of looked up and said, why the heck don't we have a Dallas office? And the Austin guys were like, okay, big boy, well, what's your business plan? And so he went to our like database of all our customers and said, how about we just work for all our national customers that we have national agreements with? And because they're all here.
Right.
And a bunch of them are, and we're working for them still today. And so sure enough, he kind of started setting up camp and we started picking up a little bit more work. And again, a Jim Collins thing, he calls it Who Luck. And sort of by who luck or dumb luck, maybe in my case, but just who luck, I got introduced to Dave, a couple different people in the industry, and went and had drinks with him one night. And he was really recruiting me heavy coming over there. And at the time, the company I was at had sort of grown out of that family feel, kind of grew by acquisition across the country.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get to the Hoot and Holler.
No, go.
And so it was a public company, the other company. And so it really just became all about the bottom line driven numbers, and really kind of, we lost focus on our people and we lost focus on our customers. And we were starving for that. I mean, I felt like I was standing on my desktop, screaming at our president, like we've lost sight of this. And so anyway, come across Dave, and he's telling me all this, point of view and all this great stuff and all this people first and customer first. And I literally was like, that's too good to be true. There's no freaking way. And he's like, no, if you don't believe me, come down to Austin. And, all right. So sure enough, it was like a Wednesday, and I checked my calendar. Boom, I'm in Austin with him Friday, meeting with some of the guys down there. One of the original 7 was a guy named Jimmy Dolan, first superintendent at DPR back in the day. He was sort of on what we call our management committee, because everything at DPR is done, all leadership is done through shared leadership. So we can talk about that at a different time. And so Jimmy's on the management committee, and so he kind of was our sponsor, our representative for Texas. And so he came in, and I got to meet him, and so I got some of that origination story of DPR and no BS, like it really is what it is. And I started kind of getting excited. And at the time, the DPR office, Dave had, I don't know, we had 10, 11 people. We were, and so I was like, kind of that entrepreneurial spirit was coming out. I was like, this could be kind of really interesting. I don't know what we could become, but I'm in. And so me and another guy, a couple of us jumped ship and went over to DPR. And Dave, I mean, he is so charismatic and electric and just on fire. And it was like every time
I can feel the conversation that y'all had.
Oh, it was incredible. I'm like, yeah, but Dave, you don't understand. We're going to need to do this. He goes, we'll do it. I said, yeah, but we got to do that. We'll do it.
Come on, let's do
whatever
it.
you need, man. I'm like, what is this guy on? But it was the best thing that ever happened to me. One of the greatest things ever in my life. And so we get over to DPR, and we're kind of like settling in, trying to figure out where we're at, and communicating with some of our previous customers, and And then we're still doing work. Still today, we're doing work at Children's Medical Center. We've never left that campus. And so Children's came to us literally that year and said, hey, one of our biggest sponsors, for the year dropped out. And so we're like, we have a huge gap in our fundraise and we really need your support. And we kind of we're a new startup, just barely trying to figure out if we're in, so 2014 became our first year as a DPR office where we put a flag in the ground and said, we're here. We're going to own our own financials and kind of live and die by our own being within that business unit. And here we are, like we're doing okay and kind of getting by, but we're still a startup. And they came in, we're looking for a pretty big check. Mm-hmm. And so we dug deep and said, it's the right thing to do. We're going to make you whole. So we wrote that check and then immediately had a meeting. You're like, okay, they're going to come back next year.
Yeah. Remember that
we just set the bar.
Yeah. Remember that one-off check?
Yeah. Yeah. And so we knew there was an expectation, but we also knew that all it did was really accelerate what we knew we would probably be doing anyway. There's so many, industry events, right? And it could be a golf thing, a clay shoot or whatever. And we literally sat around that flat organization table and we were like, no idea is a bad idea. Let's put all the tables on. And what are we going to do? And we just didn't feel like a golf tournament or one of these other deals was the right ticket. And we really wanted it to be something kind of unique and special. And I give Burroughs credit. He popped off and said, well, what if we could throw a concert? And I'm like,
it's on brand.
Yeah. Totally on brand. And I was like, what the hell do we know about throwing a concert? And then one of my other favorite sort of leadership things is this idea around power of and.
Yep.
And so I got to witness that around the table. It's like, oh, okay, wait a minute. If we could throw a concert, what would that look like? And it just started like, well, I mean, we would want to get a band that people somewhat recognize, but I mean, it can't be too expensive, but someone that recognize. Yeah, and what if we could get industry? What if we could do this? And what if it could benefit someone besides Children's Medical Center?
Yeah,
right. And so, what if this could be? And so, talk about that vision. It's like together, and I'm getting a little bit of goosebumps. We kind of got this. Man, we could really. And here we are, this little bitty startup with 12, 15, 20 employees. I think we did $37 million in revenue that year, and yet we're setting this huge vision out there, and so yeah, we kind of went about trying to put together our first ever concert. we stumbled. We had a gal in our office trying to like make some connections direct with bands. That doesn't work. You got to know people that know people, and so we kind of grew and still have a great alliance with the folks down at Gillies. They started turning us on to acts, and we kind of. And then, then we landed on an act and we're like, okay, it got real.
Game on.
Game on, right? And so our first act we booked was Randy Rogers.
Oof.
About 8 years ago. And this is our 7th annual this year because we had to skip 1 year because of COVID. We snuck in 2020 right in February, but 21, it was still a little dicey, so we ended up canceling that one. But so our 7th annual, 8th year, and it's just unbelievable. That first year, I was like, man, if we can just cover our nut, we'll be happy, and we were able to kind of cover the nut and then still give a little bit of money away to charities. And the really cool thing that you had Annette on is sort of simultaneous to all this. Annette was doing her thing, and she had, you got to hear the story. I got to hear the story about Carson and her commitment and these kinds of things. And she was doing her own sort of fundraising and different things here or there. And so we were crossing paths over the years. And what's fascinating about not just Carson, because Annette's husband is in the construction business, but there's at least 2 or 3 other kids that families were related to the construction business that we knew, and by the same brain cancer, and so for kids and the melanoma, I can't ever say it right, and so it was just interesting how it was kind of oddly hit within the construction industry, and so. Pretty early on in the infancy of this discussion at Hoot and Hollar, we knew that we wanted to figure out a way to bring Annette into the fold, and we did. And so, so our 2 primary beneficiaries are still today Children's Health, and then and what's I think super special about the Carson Leslie Foundation is it really brings Children's Health, it's great, and they do a tremendous amount of benefit. It's a world-class children's hospital, no doubt about it. The Carson Leslie thing brings such a personal touch back to it.
100%.
Yeah. So, so my gosh, it's just been insane. The concert kind of grew as we grew. And so again, some of that is just God led us there, I'll be honest, and I think just unfolded this thing. We were doubling in size as a company, year over year. We had some great opportunities that came our way, and so the industry caught on to this idea and event. And last year, again, it was our sixth, and huge. We had Aaron Watson. I think there was nearly 2,000 people that showed up, over 100 sponsors.
Whew.
And I mean, it's grown into, which is what our vision was. We didn't want it to just be a DPR event. We really wanted it to be a fundraising event for a great cause, to go have fun, but be a true AEC industry event. And if we could grow it beyond that, that would be even cooler. But today, as it stands, I mean, we have architects that are sponsors, and architects. Sorry to all my design friends. They don't spend money on anything.
Yeah.
Right? And so, to the fact that we have some great design friends that are sponsoring, a large shout out to Lasco and TD, who have been title sponsors from day one. But so many other great trade partners and vendors and suppliers and design partners, et cetera. A lot of our clients are there, and it's really, truly grown. I mean, I've seen all kinds of competitors there. I was telling Kevin off air beforehand, Dan Semino is over at Austin Commercial. His daughter, Ellie, beat the cancer, the exact cancer that these kids have gone through. And so he's like one of our biggest cheerleaders on LinkedIn and elsewhere. And so it's pretty damn cool to see how it's really kind of take a life of its own.
Yeah, it stands for something so much bigger than the event.
Yep.
And I mean, could you see that when cast in vision? Probably a hindsight light bulb, right?
Very much a hindsight light bulb.
Like,
yeah.
Like you said, a God moment of like, hey, we're going to do this to raise money. But now the pendulum shifted to like, now we have this awesome event that's really well known and attended. How are we going to make an impact with it? That is so cool.
Yeah, and at first, like I was like, man, if we can just cover the bar bill and the band, we'd be happy. And we'll write the smallest check ever and say, sorry, maybe next year will be better. We've given over $800,000 away, and last year was $100,000 each to each organization, and it's just huge shout out and thanks to all those that and phenomenal Casey Crow, Monica Jacobs in our office just have been. It's a work of passion for those two especially, and they've become really close friends with Annette to really kind of just grow this thing into what it is.
And there's a lot of things about our industry that's great, but this is one of the things that is great about our industry is bids and competition and whatever notwithstanding, like you put your guns down at the door, so to speak, because we can all rally around things. This being one of them. It's an amazing event you guys are throwing.
Yeah. It's a neutralizer, right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit what Dan Lombardo's done sort of with the 22 kill and the one drive that he's doing now. And yeah, it's a very similar but different causes, all great stuff. And it is pretty impressive. We have a phenomenal, I think that's what's so beautiful about the construction industry. We talked about that team aspect and just what it takes to pull together these projects. And it's all about people. I mean, we are in an absolute people business. And so to go support the communities that we build in is pretty rewarding.
And if you have to look back on 121 episodes of the 1720 podcast, we pull that theme through always. Just people.
Yeah.
Like you can get distracted and look at profit, but I'm going to pull you back. We're always, if you want to run a successful business, you want to make an impact. You want to make an impact in the community, to the industry, to your employee. It's all about people.
Yep.
That is the thread that just runs all the way through this thing. So I love hearing it said over and over again that is it. Go ahead. I was going to give a pitch.
Well, and another common thread of how our industry just continues to show up for these types of things.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And their heart's there. You know, it's a small percentage is like, I want to be seen by a contractor, but people are there for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And this is back-to-back weeks of us talking about that and how cool that story is, where we can rally as an industry and actually make an impact and save life, change lives. Like, talk about purpose, where we could be unified regardless of what company hat you're wearing.
Yeah. So give us our release date is February the 6th. So when is the Hoot and Hollar? Can we still get tickets? How do I show up? Tell us, give it a little pitch here.
Yeah. So it's always around Valentine's. So this year it's Thursday, February 16th. So as of the air date, you still got about 10 days to get tickets. You can go to dprhootandhollar.com, all written out. So yeah, you can get individual tickets. There's still probably some smaller sponsorships out, but we're dang near sold out on some of the bigger ones. There's only so many people we can pack in there, which we never thought we would get to this point where we're like, do we look at other venues? But DLE has been so great to us, and it's going to be a ton of fun. So yeah, we've got Casey Donahue, who's the headliner with Kyle Park. So some great singers. We typically have gone to sort of that Texas singer-songwriter genre, and it seems to be a hit with a lot of the all the folks in the industry and their plus ones that want to come out. And really it is, we've been honestly intentional about, we don't have a bunch of speeches, we don't have, silent auctions. We really just, all the fundraising, all the studying time has been done beforehand. And we now just want you to show up and celebrate life, right? So that's really what it's about.
And like you pointed out, it's close to Valentine's Day.
It is.
You could bring your plus one
for a good cause.
There's a good cause, and there's good country music going to be played.
Might
be a hero this Valentine's Day. Come to the Hoot and Holler.
It might be some two-stepping.
Definitely some two-stepping.
There you go.
Yep.
Take it all the way back to the beginning where you met your wife.
There you go.
How about that?
Well done.
Yeah. You've got a lot of notes, and so I'm afraid we missed some stuff. And I took some, I want to go back to stuff also, but before I do that, anything we missed on your notes? I have two things I want to come back to.
I'm sure we missed a ton. Kevin helped me with that sort of run sheet, and I just, I had to reflect on 50 years of my life. So
hey, man, you're a great storyteller.
Yeah.
This is good.
It's a good trip down memory lane
it is.
For you, and a
great
education for everybody listening. All right, I'm going to go back to this. You said earlier, all leadership is shared leadership. Say more about that.
Yeah, so shared leadership is a big concept that DPR, if you think about Doug, Peter, and Ron, right? Glass of wine together, started a company together. In the early days, they're kind of making joint decisions. It'd be like the three of us sitting around the table. Hey, are we going to hire this guy? Should we go after that job? Is this client going to be a good client? And so group of good friends making decisions together. And so that's really what shared leadership kind of represents. And so it today, I mean, we're a company of, 31 offices and 8,500 employees, and, we're a large company. And yet we still act and behave like a small, local, mid-sized general contractor that's very interconnected nationally. And so we have, it started with Doug, Peter, and Ron, and kind of grew some of that original 7 late when I started joining. Like Jimmy Dolan, like I said, was on that management committee. So the entire company is led by this management committee. So again, that's the uniqueness thing. We want to stand apart from a traditional corporation. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to see an org chart that says CEO, president, senior vice president, executive vice. We don't have any of that stuff. And so we have a group of leaders that come together every week and are making really good decisions on behalf of the company. And then at a local level, both regionally and like in our local office, there's I may be the leader of our Dallas-Fort Worth office, but we've got a half a dozen people on our leadership team. We meet every Monday, and it's a shared discussion and shared consensus building in terms of the decision we're making. It's not that, Jeff said that, so we're going to do this. It's great dialogue. Sometimes there's healthy debate, and that makes for better decisions. So I just think the best leadership is through some kind of shared leadership around decision making.
And it comes back to call BS.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to be flat. We're going to sit and make good decisions together. If you think it's a bad idea, raise your hand and say so.
That's right.
How do you manage the idea that eventually, let's say the three of us are all sitting here, and I say A and Kevin says B and you say C, right? So we're going to share the leadership, but we all disagree. Like, at some point, somebody has to raise their hand and say, okay, I hear you all, but I got to call the shot. Like, how do you manage through that?
Yeah, it's probably the hardest thing about the way this organization works. We have different names for it too. We call ourselves a team of teams or a matrix organization, because sometimes it's not just our group that is making the decision.
Yeah, right.
It might be like, well, I probably ought to go check with this other group that it might impact, and maybe let me go get some information from them, and what do they think about if we made that decision? What would that look like? And let's reconvene and come back. And so sometimes decision making, and we got to be careful not to get into that analysis by paralysis, but sometimes decision making can be a little bit slower in that kind of realm, because you don't have just that dictator, that person at the top of the org chart saying, no, we're going to do this. Mm-hmm. And so that said, if it works well and efficient, really it's all about being curious. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest thing that we focus on. Is another kind of funny thing we talk about sometimes is let's use our elephant ears, not our hippo ears. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes if you're in a dialogue with somebody, it's like you're already thinking about what's the next thing to say, rather than how about I just sit and listen absorb, and then be okay with that pregnant pause. Be okay with like, all right, let me just soak this in, think about that. And if you can stay curious and go, hey, tell me more about that. Like, I think I hear you, and it's called reflective listening. I think I hear you saying this. I'm a little worried about what this might happen. Can you tell me more about that? And all of a sudden, boom, you're on another 3-minute explanation of your idea.
Right.
And all of a sudden, maybe your 3-minute explanation now resonates with this guy over here, Kevin. And Kevin's like, oh, I didn't get it the first time, but now I get it.
Yeah.
I think I could get on board with that. Right. And all of a sudden, it's like, it takes time, but that's how you begin to build that consensus. If you're off in the ABC,
right.
All of a sudden, maybe B becomes, closer to A, and maybe it's not even, we're not going with your idea. Maybe it's like you all of a sudden hear me go, okay, I hear you. I love that. What if we could all, that power of and, what if we could also try this? And you go, oh, that's not a bad idea. And all of a sudden you gravitate towards, maybe it's still 80% your idea, but we even made it better.
Tweaked it and changed it.
Yeah.
One of the most powerful like tools I use anymore, and I've said it a couple times here. I stole from a buddy of mine, Grant Jackson, and I say all the time, say more about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because I heard what you said. I have some questions. I don't want to like feed you the answers. I want to just keep talking.
Yep.
You just keep going, and then eventually I can hear you pull out like, oh, okay, that I didn't hear that. Exactly what you're saying.
Yep.
It's like let's just keep talking.
Yep.
Keep going.
You make a good therapist.
Oh, dude, say more about that, Jeff.
I've gone through a lot of therapy, and that's what they say.
Oh, okay.
I don't even know how that doesn't sound appealing as a leader, where it's like a relief. You don't have to be the one that's constantly on in every single meeting. That sounds like an absolute relief as a leader, as long as it's not stubbornness and ego and all those negative character traits. Like, that sounds great to have like-minded people come in, or diverse people that come in and have the ideas. You're like, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't have to come up with that today. That sounds like a relief.
Yeah, it is.
It's a relief, but like it also highlights lots of my own personal blind spots where we get to talking and I'll say more about that, or we'll get to brainstorming an idea. And I realize I came into this, I thought my idea, I had A. I never even thought about B. Because my life experiences dictated something. Like, I didn't even know B was an option.
Yep.
Holy mackerel. Let's talk about B more. So it's really opened up my eyes to the fact that I live and think through my own personal life experiences, which are completely different than yours. Let's all put them on the table. So,
yep.
Anywho. All right, you got anything else before we kind of pivot out here?
Nah, two-step it, man.
All right, so the way we kind of roll out here, we could go back up to 100 different spots, but the way we kind of roll out is books. Like books you've read that listeners read. That's a funny thing to say. I don't think I've ever said it like that.
Listeners read.
They're capable.
They're capable of reading. And so if you got a
book. Is that like me having a radio face?
No, it's not exactly. That's not exactly what Kevin said.
Yeah. Way to twist my compliment.
Yeah, right. So if you got a book like, man, this is a stunner. Here, read this one.
Well, obviously, I've talked a lot about Jim Collins. If you were to go pick a Jim Collins book, if you haven't read any of them, go pick BE 2.0. So he wrote an original book called Beyond Entrepreneurship in like 92, right? Again, right around the era when DPR was getting started. He went and revisited this right before it got published in 2020, right before the pandemic. And the kind of unique way that he published it is he kept the original book intact. And then he went to like each chapter or each key point or whatever and kind of rewrote. And if you got the hard copy, it's actually different color pages. So it's kind of interesting. And what's really kind of cool about it is he basically weaves, it's almost like your Reader's Digest of 3 or 4 other of his books, how he puts it all into one and kind of does this reflection on him in 92 that wrote some of these original concepts and then puts it in there. And then somewhere along like page 133, he actually inserts a whole thing amongst this vision chapter around DPR and actually talks a little bit about this. He calls it a constitutional convention, this workshop I'm describing. So it's kind of, and I went, going to reread it after being at DPR now, 8 going on 9 years, it was like such a reminder at how much, foundational was set up on a lot of his beliefs. So I got to start there with that book, but there's so many others. I think there's such a power in vulnerability. I think that was one of the strengths that my mom gave me, kind of being emotional, and she was a hugger and and just fun loving and just never met a stranger. I think she taught me that emotions can be a strength, and so I think, and it took me a long time. Like I really don't know that I got that, frankly, until my dad died. And so in navigating through grief and all those kinds of things, that was one of the first times that I really felt comfortable at sort of like bringing kind of my home life, the way I've showed up at home, kind of being a loving dad and all that kind of thing, with that, my work self, which was serious and work hard. And yeah, I like to play hard and have fun at work too, but like, it just gave me permission to bring all that together and kind of find my authentic self. And so I think, anything by Brene Brown related to power of vulnerability, I think is pretty powerful for people to, and it's hard. It's hard for people to get vulnerable. I mean, everybody has a different background story and why they might hold their emotions close or wear them on their sleeve. Everybody's going to be different, but I do think there's power in vulnerability as a leader.
Just try it on. Put the reps in. It gets more comfortable.
That's right.
Yeah.
Get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, she has a great podcast too. I don't know if you ever listened to it.
She does. Yeah. She's based out of Austin, I think.
Yes. Yep. She has great, some folks from UT on, all of her, all of the connections and stuff, but really good. I commend that to our listeners listening as well, but Brene Brown's great.
Yep.
Okay, so what's the we kind of end on a cheeky way of saying something that you carry with you. We call it the one big thing. I think I usually set it up to say if listeners tune in just right here at the last minute and they only hear you say one thing, what is it that you would like for them to know or learn or take away from all of your life's journeys?
Oh, wow. All of my life journeys. That's a tough one. Well, I always say life is a journey. So I think there is something to enjoying that journey and not getting too hung up at where's the destination. From a DPR standpoint, which is what I thought about in the one big thing, was sort of this idea around, purpose, mission, values. Those are all cute and cool, but culture eats strategy for breakfast.
That's it.
And I think, and so maybe that resonates even in my personal life. I think culture and just that human connection and just building each other up. I mean, that part of the culture is, when you think about culture, it's a feeling. It's how we're behaving and acting with each other. And I think that's, just drop the mic there, I guess.
There you go. Jeff, dude, wonderful hanging out and chatting. Loved hearing some of these stories, unpacking everything. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and shout out to Kyle for putting this together.
Yeah.
He's kind of set all this up, and it was cool to see all of y'all unified in the last few weeks, sharing posts and celebrating it. And can't wait to celebrate with y'all in 10 days.
That's right.